What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to modify the gauge cluster on your 2006 to 2007 Suzuki GSXR 600 or 750. And now today what we're going to need to do this is you're going to need a soldering iron. I have an adjustable one just like this where you can turn the settings up and down. You also need to have a power supply. If you do not have the bike handy, the power supply is just to light up the gauge. Obviously, if you have your bike right there, you can plug the gauge cluster in and check to make sure all the lighting works. You're going to need some rosin core solder. This is what I have. Some tweezers, a screwdriver, a couple spoons, and you're also going to need the LEDs, which these are 1210 PLCC2 LEDs. Now, I have ice blue LEDs here. I haven't tried these on a gauge cluster yet, so I'm going to try it on this to see how it turns out. One last thing that you guys are going to need is a soldering iron that has some type of suction capability. Now, this is a Hakko FR300. Now, what this does is this has the soldering tip on the end with a small hole, so you can pop this over top of a small terminal. And it'll heat up the solder, get it to a liquid state. You'll turn on the vacuum, it'll suck the solder up, and it'll clean out the terminal hole, which I can explain and I'll show you guys more later in the video. And as far as that, we'll get started and I'll start taking this apart. There's a few screws on the back of the gauge cluster. I'm going to take those out and then start disassembling the gauge. Now, once you have all the screws out, just carefully take the backing off of the gauge cluster, set that to the side, and then you're going to want to carefully take the main board out of the gauge. Now, there's a couple foam strips in here that might be a little bit difficult. Just got to keep prying on that, and then the main board will come out. Now, what you can do is you can actually leave it in here for now. We'll be taking it out eventually, but what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to take these screws out of the back of the board. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws right there. So I'm going to take those out, and then we'll take this back out of the casing, and then we'll flip it over. Now what we're going to want to do next is we're going to want to take these spoons and we're going to carefully place them on either side just underneath the base of the needle for the gauge. Slowly pry it up. And it actually broke the needle off, but that's okay. Even though it broke off, we can glue that back down later. That happens sometimes. So put even pressure on either side and pry that needle up. And we can pull that out, and we will set that to the side with the top of our needle. All we need to do is just put a little super glue on there, let it dry, and that'll be back to normal. And then there's this little plastic tab right here. Just pull back on that while pulling up, and this front faceplate will come right off, and we'll set that to the side. Now, the next thing, which is probably the most difficult, we can put this back in here. There's all these little pins lined up right here. Now, these are basically all terminals that provide power and a readout for this LCD screen. And what we have to do is we have to basically unsolder all of those little connection points. What we can use is our soldering iron that has the vacuum built in. So basically what we'll do is we'll pop this over top of each terminal, press the button, engage the vacuum, and then it'll suck all the solder out, and we'll move that from one to the next to the next to the next, clear all those out, and then that will allow us to remove this LCD screen and get to the LEDs that are underneath that screen. Alright guys, so I drew a little illustration kind of showing how exactly we're going to go about with, taking the solder out of these little pins. Now I already went through and desoldered all of these points, but basically what you're going to want to do is you're going to take that vacuum soldering iron, you're going to place it right over top of the pin, and then when it's hot, you're going to hit the button to vacuum it and kind of swirl it around and suck all the solder out of the hole for the pin. Now basically this is what it looks like before you solder it. This part is going to be like the board. This part is going to be the LCD screen underneath. This is the pin sticking through, and then this is the solder that's basically filling up those little holes. So what you're going to do is you're going to take that soldering iron. There's that little hole in the end. You're going to put that right over top of the pin, and then once it's hot, you're going to, heat it up, hit the vacuum, spin it around a little bit, suck all that solder out, and then afterwards it's going to look like this over here with the pin sticking through with all the solder gone, and that's basically allowing nothing holding that LCD screen into place. And then after you desolder everything, all these pins are going to move around freely, which is exactly what we're looking for. So now what we can do is, if everything is done right, we pull the board directly up, and you can see that LCD screen has stayed exactly in place. So now we have the board with all of these LEDs exposed that were originally underneath the screen, and then these are the ones that we're going to be changing out, along with these ones around here that are going to be the color for the tachometer for the RPMs, and these are the ones that we're going to change out right here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 LEDs altogether that we're going to change out. Now I'm actually going to show you guys a clip from my ZX6R gauge cluster LED modification to exactly show you how these LEDs are removed and taken off, and then also how these LEDs are placed back into place, because it's the same technique for for these style LEDs. So it's same for the ZX6R and the GSXR gauge clusters. So I'm going to show you guys that little method right now, and then I'm going to skip forward to this gauge cluster with all of the new blue LEDs in place, and then I'll show you guys reassembly of the gauge. One thing to note on these LEDs, you can see there's a tiny black triangle to the top left. Now there is basically a little chamfered edge on each of these LEDs. Basically it looks like there's a little corner cut off. When we take these old LEDs off and pop the new LEDs in, we're going to want to make sure that chopped off edge lines up with that same side that black triangle is on, because it's going to make sure that the positive and negative sides of the LED are in the correct position, and if it's flopped, the LED is not going to light up. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to take these LEDs off of the board. Now right now I have my soldering gun heated up, and it is up to temperature, and we're going to take our tweezers. This is where it gets a little tricky. So I'm going to see if I can zoom in real good for you guys. So basically what I'm going to do, clean off the soldering iron tip. What we're going to do is we're going to want to heat up one side of the LED, and then basically just pull up on that side. So we're going to heat up the solder. Easier said than done, right? There we go. So we're going to heat that up and then just lift up on that same side that we just lifted up. And we're going to repeat this for all of the LEDs. So here we go again. I'm just going to heat and lift. And now to take these LEDs, just for an example to show you guys how to do this, to take these LEDs completely off the board now, we're just going to heat up the other side and pop it off of that pad. So now you can see that we've got two nice clean pads for our new LED to lay down on. And I'm going to do this one too, just to show you guys again. Kind of bend that LED back down, heat up that other side, and we've got those two nice clean pads. So that is how we take those LEDs off of the board. Okay, so in order to place the new LEDs on the board, you're going to want to grab your new pack of LEDs, pull back the film, drop one LED on the board. You're going to want to rotate it so that that corner is on the top left. Get some solder on your soldering gun. So you're going to want to get a nice little pool of solder on one side. Slide that in there, wait for it to dry. And then you're going to want to spin that around. Let's see, which one are we working with? This little guy. And then get some more solder on there. And heat up that other pad. And then just apply a little other dab of solder, and that's all it is. So that's how you apply the LEDs, and then after everything's all set, I like to go through and just kind of wipe off the excess, kind of clean that up a little bit. That way we don't have a lot of solder poking around. Alright, so I have all of the LEDs installed now using the technique I just showed you guys. I didn't really like the look of the ice blue, so I actually have the ice blue LEDs over here, and I changed these ones to regular blue LEDs. The ice blue is more of like a cool white, and the blue is more of just a real vibrant blue, so I think it's going to look nice with the blue over here and the ice blue over here. So the next thing we're going to need to do to reinstall everything, take your LCD screen, and you can see all the little pins here. We're going to need to line those up with the holes that are in the board. So what we can do is just line everything up, get those little pins, and it'll slide right in there like that. And then what we'll do is, once we have that LCD screen poking through there with the pins, we can reinstall these small little screws back into the board just to hold everything back in place. It's going to be the 3 smaller screws that we took out earlier that are going to go on the top, right, and bottom. And then I'll just screw those in real quick. So now that we got the board, or the LCD screwed into the board with these 3 screws, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my soldering iron from one side, I'm going to bring it on the right side, and then the solder from the left side, and then each of these pins I'm just going to heat up, dab it on, and resolder those pins back in place. So I'm just going to go all along the line and resolder all those pins back in place. So now that we have the LCD screen all soldered in there with all those pins soldered, you just want to make sure and go through that no two pins have too much solder where they're, you know, overlapping and touching each other, because that's going to mess up some of the connections. So make sure all of those pins are individually soldered with none touching any other ones. And now from here, we're going to take our faceplate and just place that back onto the gauge. There we go. There's that. Remember, there's that little clip right there. So now we've got that on there. I don't have any super glue with me, so one thing I'm going to do off camera is I'm just going to, you know, attach this, put a little dab of super glue, you know, right on top of the little plastic piece here. This little tab goes into this part of the needle, just like that. So I'm just going to put a little super glue on there just to hold it in place, which I'm going to do off camera. It's pretty straightforward. Just, you know, set that to the side, make sure it dries real nice, and then we'll put that back into there. And then after we are done with that, then it is basically just, you know, put some of these screws in the back. We have this one larger screw right here that goes in and holds the faceplate, so I'm going to throw that in there. So that one holds the faceplate down, and then from there, you know, we just pop it back in the case. And obviously, you know, I'm going to put the needle on there, but you pop it back in the case and then put all those screws that we have over here, put all these screws back in the back of the case, and that's all it is. So I'm going to show you guys actually how to power up the gauge without having the bike near you. So obviously, you know, if you're doing this to your own bike, you can just plug it into the wiring harness and, you know, turn the key and then everything will light up. Because I'm at my house and I don't have the bike with me, what you can do is you can power these pins on the back, and if you provide some power, you can get the gauge to light up. Now here is a little schematic that I made up. I spent a lot of time figuring this out. So right here is basically, if you were looking at the back of this right here, you know, there's that little notch in the middle. All these circles represents the pins. So this little guy right here, bottom right, is going to be a positive. To the left of that is going to be a negative. Top right is going to be a positive. And then second in from the top left is going to be negative. As long as we provide power to those pins, it's going to light up the gauge with the backlighting, which I'm going to do right now. So I've got those wires all plugged into the back of the gauge. I'm going to turn my power supply on, and this is going to light up. So right there we have the blue LEDs over here, those regular blue, and we have that ice blue, which actually doesn't really look too bad right now. So I think this is going to kind of match our build a little bit better with the Suzuki rebuild that I'm currently doing. And yeah, that looks a lot better than that stock red. So all I really have to do is just pop that needle in and tighten everything up, and that's pretty much it. So if you guys found this helpful, hit a like below and hit that subscribe button if you guys aren't already subscribed. I'll put a link in the comments to, you know, some of the tools that I have where you can buy some of these LEDs. And if you guys, you know, like this video, leave me some comments on, you know, some projects that you've done. So I'll see you guys next time. Peace.